Cloud Community College.
This is Debbie Kern.
Hi, Debbie.
Hello. Hi. I'm not
Colby,
using.
Colby, can you give us a wave? Dodge City. Garden City. Hutchinson. Salina Adult Ed. Seward County. Highland. Lawrence. Manhattan Area Technical College. Washburn Tech. Johnson County Community College. Kansas City, Kansas Community College. Butler Community College. Cali Community College. WSU Tech. Flint Hills Technical College. Neosho County Community College. And last but certainly not least, Paola Adult Education. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Pat, I think you can see we are out in full force today in Kansas, and hope to actually see each other soon. So Erin is going to share the next slide. I'm just going to do some really quick housekeeping. So first of all, please remember to mute your phones when you're not speaking, and if you need to walk away for whatever reasons, with the please do mute your computers or your phone so as to not interrupt the presentations throughout the day. We do have a number of breaks that have been built in. As with all virtual meetings, the agenda is pretty fluid, and it has been emailed out a couple of times. There is agenda police, and that would be in the form of Erin Guardiola. She is going to be running the show, doing the great job that she does, and keeping everyone on track. So if she jumps in and gives you the virtual 5 minutes, it's so that we can keep everyone on track and have breaks. And we will have another guest speaker at 1 o'clock today, and want to make sure that we are on track for everything. And we give plenty of time for questions. Also, this meeting will be recorded, and we will put that on under resources on our KBOR site. Feedback. Yesterday, I sent out a meeting evaluation. It's a Word document. So please take this opportunity to, as you go through the sessions today, we really want your feedback, and this helps us know how to plan technical assistance and professional development, and really what you all need from us. Mark your calendars for our summer meeting, August 2nd and 3rd in Topeka. That will be an in-person meeting in the Curtis building in Topeka, that houses our offices, but it also will have virtual capabilities. So Pam, I heard Pam Cannon mention earlier that there are more registrants for this meeting that there was last year, and I think we're seeing that statewide. That with the virtual capabilities, there's more access to professional development and to really sharing information. So we hope that we get the program directors in person in Topeka, and we will certainly share those virtual capabilities as they come along. And Karen Ulansky has a question in the chat about sending the PowerPoints. I sent several of the PowerPoints yesterday late afternoon, and I believe Chris is going to send out the other ones here shortly. So I just ran the bus over Chris, but he's recovering nicely. So those are coming, Karen. And then also, I wanted to share the who does what. I think this has come up, clarifying what board staff have what tasks. That is coming soon. But I just want to remind everyone that with Eric back, he is doing the CCRS, the STAR, and the professional development. Sue will continue to do time and effort. And then, of course, handle GED and pathway to career, all of which will be talked about over the next few hours today. So the who does what, actually, we're all available for whatever you need. But I did want to clarify with Eric's return that Sue would be keeping the time and effort, and then the remainder of that will go to Eric. So he'll be talking about all of that today, as will Sue. And then lastly, I just wanted to share that as a requirement through WIOA of the Perkins 5 legislation, you might remember that a couple of years ago, the state formed 19 regional teams to do a needs assessment. And so in order for secondary and post-secondary eligible recipients to receive Perkins funds, they have to conduct a needs assessment, which includes a wide variety of stakeholders, and Title II Adult Ed is one of those. So I just wanted to let you know that we are in the process of developing those stakeholder teams. We have named co-chairs throughout the state to work together and lead that needs assessment process. Those co-chairs are secondary. And then for those of you at a community or tech college that is an eligible Perkins recipient, your Perkins grant manager is one of those co-chairs. So I wanted to keep everyone in the loop because they have been provided our adult ed director's contact information so that as those teams are formed, they will be bringing in all of those stakeholders, as well as adult education, as just a really critical, vital part of that needs assessment planning. So with that, I would like to go ahead and move on to introducing our guest speaker today, who we are so lucky to have. Dr. Pat Tyler is with the National Association of State Directors of Adult Ed, where she serves as the executive director. She served as she walks your walk, folks. She has been where you are. She served as the state director of Adult Ed in Maryland for 8 years. She's been an accountability manager, grant writer, teacher, trainer, counselor, adult ed director, you name it. You know all the roles that all of you play, and Pat has certainly performed in those capabilities as well. She joined the Maryland State Department of Education as a specialist for workforce development. So she brings to us a lot of experience around workforce development, and all of you are well into all of the workforce planning, post-secondary ed, and working with our workforce centers. So I think her remarks today are going to be just really spot on. There will be time for questions. We have planned according to my agenda, which we have to maintain because we have Aaron, the agenda, please. We're going to give Pat about probably 15 minutes or whatever, however long she wants to talk, and then we'll add some time there for questions. So with that, Pat, welcome to Kansas. I know you sort of feel like you're here. Depends on what part of the state you're in, as if you see a lot of trees or not. But we're so happy to have you. And with that, I will turn it over to you. And thank you again for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Connie, for the wonderful introduction. And you've actually elevated me to doctor level. So in conscience, I have to tell you that that's an honorary just conferred by Connie. But anyway, but I appreciate you running through my experience. Good morning, Kansas. It's so nice to be here. I hope I'll be able to visit you in person someday, but I'm delighted to be here with you virtually to share some of the things that NASDAE has been hearing from your colleagues across the country over the past very, very unusual year. I'm sorry about the rain in Kansas. It's a beautiful sunny spring day here in Baltimore, Maryland. But what I know from experience is if it's raining in Kansas today, it's coming my way. So But anyway, let me start by telling you a little bit about the National Association of State Directors of Adult Education. We exist to provide resources and support for state directors and the state staff of adult education programs as they work to implement the statewide programs. So in a nutshell, what we do is we offer some training. We have an annual National Training Institute. We're rolling out a new leadership excellence and development cohort training for states to participate in if your state director selects that opportunity. But most importantly, I think what we do is offer networking and communication and sharing among the state directors so that they have a forum to share experiences, tools, ask questions of each other, help each other, and also provide input to us for our very important government relations work. And I'll explain that a little bit. We don't lobby, but we do offer information, and we serve as a voice of adult education. We communicate with the Federal Administration of Adult Education to help let them know what your concerns are. We also provide information and data that's essential for the decision makers on Capitol Hill in Washington as they need to understand the role of adult education, the need for adult education, and the wonderful impact of the work you do. So that's the role of NASDAE. I've been executive director of NASDAE for 4 years now. After, as Connie mentioned, serving as state director of adult education in Maryland, which was the culmination of those many years of adult education that Connie mentioned. And without taking too much time to talk about it, my education career began in a high school English classroom. And after teaching for 3 years, I was displaced by a family relocation and ended up in a new community to me that had no need for one more English teacher. But what they did offer me was the opportunity to substitute teach in their adult education program in the evenings. It certainly wasn't going to pay the bills, but I thought it would be a good way to keep my foot in the education field while I took a job in an office of a large manufacturing company. That was my day job. So at the end of a full day of work and taking care of family, I dragged myself off to the local high school where I worked with adults preparing for the GED test and learning the English language. And much to my surprise, rather than having to struggle to find energy to work with the students, I was so enlivened by their motivation and their sincere appreciation of the opportunity to learn. It was very different from the high school students that I had previously taught. So I fell in love with adult education, soon offered opportunities to have my own classes and, done all those things. Eventually at a local program, wrote and managed grants, professional development, data reporting, so on and so forth. And eventually I was offered the opportunity to work for the state. So that's all part of how I relate to you as an adult education provider. And, I never forget those experiences, although, the paperwork and the administrative things are the reality of making it work where the rubber meets the road on the ground. Anyway, fast forward to March 2020. I don't think that anything that any of us had experienced prepared us for the need to adapt to life in a pandemic, let alone delivering adult education amidst panic and with a population of students that weren't fully equipped to participate virtually. They didn't have the tools, they didn't have the skills, and in many cases, they didn't have the internet connections. So for the ensuing months, what NASDAE has done is to create a monthly open forum call to hear from adult educators about the challenges and the solutions spurred by the pandemic. We have been communicating your concerns, your needs to officials at the federal administration and also, the decision makers in Washington about funding and legislative issues. So here's some things we've been hearing from from your colleagues all across the country. First of all, the panic. What we heard was, do we have to shut our programs down? Will our federal funding be stopped? And of course, that wasn't the case. The U.S. Department of Education stressed that continuity of services to students was the most important thing that we could focus on. So state directors worked to spread the message that our students were vulnerable and, needed our help more than ever during the pandemic. And I hate to use that phrase has become so trite and overused, but it really is true that our students, may not have the ability to gather correct, accurate information. So the next huge challenge was, well, how do we serve our students when we can't meet them at our centers? And as you probably experienced, there was a wide spectrum of I guess, knowledge of how to work in a virtual world with the instruction. So among our staff, we had a huge learning curve. But as always, adult educators have really risen to the occasion and challenged themselves to reach their students any way they could. They've learned how to do virtual instruction. They've helped their students to interact via computers, tablets, cell phones, and even landlines for tutoring. I've heard of many teachers driving to students' home to drop off paper packets, and they follow up by phone. And I heard of one program that sent packets to a large printing company with a list of their students' mailing addresses and just had them mass sent out. So among program staff, there's been an incredible amount of sharing of strategies and general know-how. And so that's been really heartwarming to see. But still, there have been the significant drops in enrollment that we've seen nationally. Our students may not even have realized at first that they could continue to participate in other ways than showing up in person. And again, they lack the tools, the skills, and the bandwidth to participate. Similarly, they might, if they do have an internet connection, they share it with other family members. And sadly, our country still has many areas where there is not adequate or affordable internet. But the good news is that on the horizon, there is proposed legislation that will provide low-cost internet to households and to expand the availability of high-speed internet. So that's one thing that's pending in Congress, and we look to hear more about that in the near future. We also heard that programs need ways to advertise that they are open. And so NASDAE worked with KAEA to develop Move Ahead with Adult Ed. If you haven't already explored that, I encourage you to just Google it, Move Ahead with Adult Ed. There are multimedia ways to create information flyers and press releases about your program, and it's all free, absolutely no cost and no membership requirement. So if you need some help with getting the word out about your program, Move Ahead with Adult Ed. Another thing that we learned from our providers across the country is that while we couldn't engage all of our former students, there was a whole new group of students that could suddenly participate because they were not required to participate in person. So they might have been parents of small children or had healthcare transportation issues that kept them homebound. And of course, there was the group of newly unemployed adults who suddenly had time on their hands. So the state and local adult educators wanted to know, well, can we enroll new students? We can't necessarily meet the requirements, but the answer was yes. Local program personnel were reluctant to enroll students without the required assessments, but the federal government offered provisional placement and, stressed the importance of, other ways to establish eligibility. So eligibility in a program, if someone doesn't have a high school diploma or is learning English language, that's an easy answer. Yes, they're eligible. But for some others, you might do some sort of a non-official assessment, a booked test, or, a program developed test to establish their level, and then you can provisionally level them. What you can't do is measure educational functioning level gains without an NRS approved test. But again, the most important aspect of what we have done over the past year is to provide that continuity of service for our students. So there's been large concerns about performance. You know, everybody has been so schooled in the need to perform and to show those EFL, those educational functioning level gains, that it was very difficult to assuage the fear that they will be in trouble if they don't meet their performance goals. So, you know, NRS tests up until a year ago pretty much had to be administered in person, face to face in your program, while the NRS and high school equivalency test publishers scrambled to rapidly disseminate, develop and disseminate virtual proctoring and administration of their tests. It's not been a perfect solution, because what we hear is that it's very time consuming, low student to teacher ratios, and it's very costly because of that. And certainly the technology deficits, maybe for the instructors, the test administrators, but also for the students, prevent it from being a wide scale solution to that problem. So again, what I found is that no amount of reassurance that sanctions for low performance would be imposed, you know, have really comforted those of you in the field. And I just want to say kudos for taking so seriously the need to document the outcomes of our students, because it is of critical importance. But we also know that sanctions for performance aren't, according to law, allowable for the 2019-2020 year. So for the current year, they will be looking at us meeting performance goals. They will also be utilizing a statistical adjustment model that will adjust for some of the issues that have affected our performance this year. And also, you know, there will be a 2-year look at performance rather than just 1 year. So I say that to try to, you know, help you to relax and again, focus on the students. You know, we know we're likely to see performance declines, and so do the people at the federal government, and you know, all your funding authorities are recognizing that too. So because we've heard so much concern about this, you know, NASDAE has been working with a group of administrators, instructors, program folks, a researcher, a consultant, and some other associations that support adult education to discuss what are some of the life-wide and life-deep outcomes for adult students that are participating in your programs. And there are lots of different ideas about this in terms of what you might be collecting at your local program, in terms of, you know, increased opportunities for employment rather than the actual job, but, you know, prior to that, you know, progress towards some of these goals, you know, improved health outcomes, improved family outcomes, you know, even things like getting a driver's license and learning to read more independently. So there are all the kinds of things that we have, you know, I think traditionally looked at in adult education, but you can continue to gather those and you can report narratively. They do not replace, you know, the required performance at the federal level. And we certainly encourage you to do your best, you know, wherever possible to continue to provide the assessments. But we just want to make sure that you can continue to tell us some of the unique outcomes that you're seeing for your students and your unique ways of gauging the success of your programs. So again, let us know. We love to hear it. Adapting to the virtual adult education environment, as mentioned earlier, has not been even across the spectrum of adult education programs. Curriculum has required revision to fit online learning, but I want to let you know your colleagues across the country are ready to share And I highly recommend, if you haven't already joined as a links community member, I would encourage you to do so. There's a myriad of resources on links, and there are many forums for you to ask questions and to share with your colleagues and to, to gather resources that you can use in your programs. KAEA, one of our partner organizations, has hosted helpful webinars regularly throughout the past year, and they're all archived, recorded and archived for your use, many, many valuable tools. And, we don't, as an association, ever endorse products, but I think some of the vendors have been very, very helpful in sponsoring webinars for, state, local program instructors, administrators to share some of, the strategies that they've used over the last year. So particularly, I know Burlington English, again, we're not endorsing products, but we know that they have recorded and archived many of the state webinars that include instructional strategies. So I encourage you to seek, and always you can contact me if you're looking for something, and I'll help you find it. We don't necessarily have the resource at our fingertips, but we will go out and ferret it out. So trying to schedule programming is another severe challenge that we've heard over the past year. Sites have closed, opened, closed again. In most areas of the country, hybrid programming continues. Serving students in the workplace has posed a unique challenge, especially when the school or college where your program is situated is closed, but yet a business partner is open and needs services. Some of those situations may require special attention by the officials at your institution and the state office. But again, it's trying to coordinate with all partners that can get those services out there. And there does seem to be no adequate means of predicting when you will be able to meet in person consistently. And it varies across states, again, with openings, closings, reopenings. That's compounded by an understandably widespread reluctance among staffers and students to return to public spaces during a continued pandemic spread. Tragically, COVID has not spared any demographic in the world, and adult education has been affected like everyone else. There must be recognition at your program level of the need to grieve losses. It may be necessary to seek a professional in your area to assist your staff and students with the process in some cases. In cases of positive test results for students or teachers, transparency with respect for the individual privacy is essential. Your students may lack accurate information, and adult education can play a huge role in providing sound, factual instruction about precautions during a pandemic, as well as mandates and general practices to mitigate health risks rather. While we're beginning to see some positive trends in adult education enrollment, this is by no means widespread across the nation. Many of our professionals opine that virtual and hybrid programming is here to stay. We do expect to see more resources devoted to virtual instruction and assessment. We have already seen that many training components for the integrated education and training programs have been offered virtually online. Statewide eligible training provider lists that you can use to find a partner for your IET programs have begun to identify those that are offered virtually in many cases. Even as vaccine statistics increase the trend toward herd immunity and schools and businesses reopen, the benefits of virtual environments have been seen and are here to stay. NASDAE will continue in the role of being a support for your state office and will continue to listen and communicate your concerns to folks at the federal level. As to some upcoming opportunities for adult education, here's the good news. There is a proposal to substantially increase the federal investment in adult education to $1 billion annually. That's a huge, huge increase for us. And there are major advocacy efforts taking place to support that. Again, NASDAE does not lobby, but you have some maybe state associations and national associations that do, and they provide information on how you can advocate. The increased funding that would result if this passes could mitigate the high cost of virtual instruction and assessment, and could provide tools and connections for students, just among some of the very things. It could diminish your waiting lists and provide instruction for all who need it. Another opportunity exists in the reauthorization of the governing legislation, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. NASDAE will be submitting recommendations for this reauthorization. We hope that they will be taken seriously. Some of the recommendations we're making are around performance measures that better capture the results of your work, more parity in the one-stop system, increased focus on digital literacy and resilience, just to name a few. Stay tuned for any updates on the legislative news. And with that, I haven't heard from the agenda police yet, so I think I maybe have come in under the line for the time. But I want to thank you again for the opportunity to share your time this morning. I wish you a wonderful conference, and I'm open if there are any questions or comments that it's time to share.
Thank you so much, Pat. We really appreciate your remarks and thoughts from a national level, and really sharing that everybody has been in the same boat. Are there any questions for Pat before she hops off of here for her next call? Looks like, Janice, do you have a question?
I do. First of all, thank you for being with us this morning and for your remarks. That was very informative. And I would be very interested to hear just a little bit more on the recommendation for changes in performance measures. Is there anything you can share with us on that topic?
Well, yeah, there's something that that I think one of the major things that we've been hearing is that all of your high school equivalency awards count toward your performance measure. We think that's wrong. We think that to limit the number of high school equivalencies that count toward performance based on whether someone got a job or entered post-secondary education within a year is unreasonable. We think as an education program where, the terminal, I guess the terminal performance for a student's time in adult education is to meet high school equivalency, certainly not the termination of their education experience, but the termination of their time with us. So to not be able to count all of those is problematic. It counts as a measurable skills gain if you don't have another skills gain that happens after that, and then it happens as a performance measure, as I said, if you've entered a job. So that's one of the primary things. Also, there's no unique performance measure for entering post-secondary education, which again, I mean, that's a major goal, that we have transitioned our students into post-secondary education. So we'll be recommending some, changes in that. So if you have others, we'd like to hear them and help to support them.
Does anyone have any other questions? Or I know Pat would be happy to follow up with you individually if you think of something later. But here's your chance.
Okay. But certainly, continue to communicate any questions or thoughts to Connie, and she will forward them on to me. So again, thank you so much for sharing your time this morning. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
Thank you so much, Pat. This is a virtual wrap. Have a great day. We appreciate you being with us. And with that, I'll hand it over to Miss Erin.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Connie. So we are doing fine on time. So let's go ahead and take a break. That's in our agenda, and let's come back at 9:30. So see y'all back here at 9:30.
Well, good morning, everyone. Looks like it is time to get back from break, or at least that's what I've been notified by the time cop.
You got it.
Need to get with it. I will apologize in advance for any extra background noise. We're getting exterior doors put in today, which is exciting, but it's periodically very loud. So I will try to speak up so everyone can hear me. So today, I think we've had a lot of questions that have come up. We have some new directors, kind of want to go through a basic funding 101, talk about next year's allocations. Spoiler alert, we don't have them yet. So I don't want anyone to be waiting with bated breath. So that's like the last slide. So I'll just go ahead and ruin that for you. We're planning on getting those out by the end of April. If we have them sooner, then we will give them to you. I know that's important for developing your budget for next year. But I want to make sure that you have that information in advance. So we're going to go kind of through the basic types of funding that are available, give everyone an overview of what those are, how you get them, how you can use them. And then later today, we have a short overview of allowability. So we've also had some questions on, is this allowable? Can we spend it on this? So some of those questions will be addressed more this afternoon, but we kind of just want to break it down very basic. What is adult ed funding? So the main or the core adult ed funding types would be our AFLA funding. So WIOA Title II reauthorized the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. Within that, internally in our office, we refer to basic funding. And that basic funding would be your main federal allocation. And then also your state allocation. So we'll break those out this afternoon in allowability because we talk about the budget a little bit more as well. But the basic funding is really when we put in the funding formula, what it spits out would be your basic funding, federal and state. Then we also have IELCE program specific funding. So many of you may remember that under WIOA, we have IELCE in two parts. IELCE as a service, it's an allowable adult ed service that you would use basic funds to deliver those services to students. And then IELCE as a program, which is a separate, not very large funding allocation to deliver IELCE as a program, which is IELCE services delivered with an integrated education and training program simultaneously that prepares students for and places them into unsubsidized deployment. So there's a very clear distinction between IELCE as a service and the IELCE that you receive money for. So what we have tried to do, because that was a huge change from ELCE under WIA to IELCE, is those funds have really been sort of historically based on application. We currently have 7 programs that are doing IELCE. Then we also have some of our other secondary funding types. We have the AOK Proviso, which provides tuition funding. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the following slides, but it's tuition funding, but at 100% of the KBOR composite rate for a course. That's sometimes hard to grasp what that is, but a majority of the time, if you took an institution's tuition rate, the composite rate would be 2 to 3, sometimes 4 times the basic tuition rate, because that composite rate includes instructor costs, building costs, material costs, fees. It includes everything. So that proviso pays much higher than what a standard student would pay if they were just taking the course and paying per credit hour. We also have the GED Accelerator incentive funds. When we talk about GED Accelerator as an incentive, it's not an incentive for your student, it's an incentive for your institution. Those two funding types are paid to our post-secondary partners. So if your adult ed program is housed at a community or technical college, you're the same institution. That money goes to your business office. That distinction for where the money is paid to is really for our USD programs, Salina, Paola, Lawrence, because if you're partnering with someone to do accelerating opportunity, that money first goes to the post-secondary institution. And then any money that would go to the adult ed program from AOK GED Accelerator funds would need to be specified in an MOU. And sometimes, I say that's specifically for the USD programs, sometimes that's the case within the same institution. But we try to make sure that you have a good understanding of those two funding types so that you can advocate for your program and try to get what would be your fair share of the funding so that you can continue offering that that type. And we also have talking a little bit more about AOK at 10:40 today, and then I'm doing a AOK specific session during KAEA to kind of talk about those specific things, both programmatically and from the business side. Then we have the other category. These change. We have the AOK at Work, which we also call our Walmart grant that Aaron and Lisa are going to be pushing very hard because we have money that we need to spend, but I'll let them talk about that later. And then we also have things like the Integrating Academics grants, integrating academics with CTE, any of those special grants that we do sometimes that aren't necessarily a lot of money, but we try to make available for everyone so that you can do something special or try something that you normally wouldn't in sort of a low risk pilot program way. Any questions about the categories before we kind of dive into the funding formula? No, but Heather's taking a picture of the ceiling.
You're trying to get reception.
It's difficult sometimes. So as far as the adult ed funding formula, so this would apply to those basic funds. So this is the majority of our federal flow through funding and then our state money. So when we talk about, I should have added this to the slide, but it's something that we tend to put out when we get our federal allocation. They give us a number, and that's basic funds, federal basic funds, and then it's the IELCE amount. Those federal basic funds, we then apply a formula to. So 82.5% goes to local programs. 5% goes to state administration, and then 12.5% goes to state leadership. And that's the state leadership is what we have some required and we have some optional allowable state leadership activities, but that's what really is meant to fund the statewide professional development system.
Chris, can you repeat that again, please, those numbers?
Yes. So when we get our federal allocation, 82.5% is flow through funding. That's what goes to directly to programs. 12.5% is state leadership, which funds our required and allowable state leadership activities. Namely, all the state leadership activities are professional development related in some aspect. And then 5% is for state administration. So us, rent, computers, and other allowable administrative activities. So when we talk about the adult ed funding formula, those basic funds, we take that, the flow through funds, the flow through federal funds, and our state funds, and we put those into a pot, and then we figure out based on past performance, using this funding formula, what each program's allocation is. So that funding formula has a couple of different sections. We have base funding. So each program gets an institutional grant. So every program gets the same amount of money for that. So the base funding is 30%. So 17% of the state and federal basic funds is then divided by the number of programs we currently have. So right now we have 20. So every program gets the same amount. Then 11% of that of the total. Yeah. So 11% of that of the total would be based on your 3-year average enrollment. So the percentage of total statewide enrollment that you had. And then 2% is based on need, which we use the American Community Survey data at the beginning of a grant cycle to determine what the need is. So we look at the number of individuals in your area that you stated in your application that you're going to serve, so the counties. How many people don't have a high school diploma? And then how many individuals speak English less than well? And then we use that to split up that 2% of adult ed funding. So not incredibly high amounts there. Kelly, go ahead.
I know it's only 2%, but where in the state are the heaviest areas for those percentages?
Sedgwick County is the highest need, followed by Wyandotte, and then the Johnson County area. And then from there, it's kind of a descending scale, but our Western Kansas or our more rural programs tend to serve more counties. So they're all more or less have about the same level of need. But like I said, it's not a lot of funding. We added it. It was actually added when Nancy and Susan were there so that we could say that our funding formula was need-based. So it is a factor, but it's not the largest one. Any other questions?
Yes, Chris, I have a question.
Yes, George.
I don't see 9 and 10 on here for the measurable skill gain completions. That's just an omission, or is there a reason that's not there?
That was a change that we made several years ago to even out the MSGs that were doubled. I'm trying to remember when we redid the funding formula, but it would have been in 17 or 18.
So the 9s and 10s don't count for measurable skill gains at all?
They do. So we'll get to that. We used to double
9s, right?
Oh, actually, I take that back. That is an omission.
Okay. Thank you.
They're counted. Yeah. Thanks, Georgia. We'll fix that.
All right. Thank you.
I assure you, every single level is being counted.
Okay.
So to get to that performance-based part, so overall, our funding formula is 30% base funding, of which we have that institutional grant, the enrollment, and the need. Then the 70% is what we call performance. Within that 70% of performance, 45% is outcome-based, and 25% is based on the quality points or the quality measures. Of the outcomes, so each outcome is weighted the same with the exception of NRS levels 1, 2, and 7 and 8, or depending on if you're looking at federal tables or our state tables, ABE levels 1 and 2 or ESL levels 1 and 2. So in Kansas, we've always referred to the levels as 1 through 12. Federally, they're just referred to ABE ASC 1 through 6 or ESL ELA 1 through 6. So for us, we double the MSGs for entry levels 1, 2, 7, and 8. And then this is where that omission happened. We count single MSGs for 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We used to double 9 and 10, but in discussions when we reauthorized it, we moved them to just single counting 9 and 10. So like I said, we'll get that changed because they do count. And then median wage, how we calculate that is we calculate for a program year, the state median wage, which has been around $4,500. And then we take each individual student at the program level and we see how many students do you have that are making greater than or equal to the state median wage. And then you get a funding or an outcome point for each one of those. For employment second quarter after exit, employment fourth quarter after exit, that's pretty straightforward. It's the individuals who are employed during those time periods. But if you do remember, one of the stipulations for WIOA was that you cannot count someone as fourth quarter employed unless they were employed in the second quarter. I don't know why, but that was a federal guideline and that's what we're also following. And then credential attainment, that's the part that Pat Tyler was talking about, NASDAE lobbying Octa to change. So credential attainment is a post-secondary credential. We give you that. Or if a student obtains the GED during their time with us, we are only allowed to count that GED attainment in our credential attainment measure if they're also employed or if they've enrolled in post-secondary. So that's the part where it's always been GED and. So GED and employment, GED and post-secondary education. Sorry, checking my time cop status. So then we also allow programs who are doing any family literacy to count involvement in children's education, involvement in children's literacy, citizenship skills for those of you doing citizenship in some format, either through IELCE or just the traditional citizenship skills. Citizenship skills is still a CASAS citizenship skills test. I'm going to see how many times I can say citizenship skills in a very short time frame. But if they achieve that status on that CASAS test, that counts as an outcome. College readiness. I know we've had a couple of questions about college readiness over the last couple of years because we don't have very many who've achieved college readiness anymore. And I think that really just speaks to the changes we've seen under the college and career readiness standards, shifting from TABE 9 and 10 to TABE 11 and 12, much more academically rigorous test. Because to achieve that college readiness designation, students have to have a college ready score in every subject area that they're tested in. So reading and math, or if we're using the GED, they would have to be that college college ready in all 4 test subjects. You do have the option of using AccuPlacer at your institution, but again, using AccuPlacer Next Gen, they would have to achieve that college ready level in every subject area. So, we used to have students with CASAS or with TABE 9 and 10 who would get that right, when we pre-tested them. Now that is much harder to achieve, which is probably more accurate, but it does make it more difficult to get funding points for that college readiness measure. And then left public assistance is something that's on here, although we've never really used it because there's not a good way to determine whether or not a student has left public assistance. It's something that other titles have been using. And I'm not entirely sure how they're figuring it out, other than the fact that they have access to see whether someone's on unemployment, whether someone is currently receiving some sort of SNAP or TANF benefit. And we don't have the ability to see that data. So that's something that we've kind of left. It's still on there, but we don't know how to track that at this point. And then I won't go through quality measure by quality measure. We've been so Matt Cannell asked a very good question. What about data matching? Would that catch it? It would, in fact. But in order to data match, you would have to have a data sharing agreement between 2 state agencies, or more, because we would need to do Department of Labor for unemployment. We'd have to do DCF for SNAP or TANF, things like that. And that's difficult. Yeah. So, but it was a good question, Matt. It has been discussed. So the quality points, we really haven't updated. They are due for updating. I know we've been talking about it. 2020 was going to be the year that we were going to have new ones ready for everyone for the new grant cycle. And then I'm not sure what happened during 2020, but it is something that is still on the list to get those updated, to make sure that they tie in better with WIOA, with what we're currently doing. And we will include programs, I'm sure, in that discussion. But we're not getting rid of some of the things that some programs don't like and keeping things that you do. We still have to make it fair. That wasn't directed towards anyone. But Janice and Kelly are right in the center line of the people that I see.
You don't want me to ride my dead horse that's died 89 times?
Nope.
Okay.
Please don't.
Well,
Kelly, I think we can overpower him.
we're on each side of the state. We'll just
Yeah, close in.
put us on the committee, Chris. That's all you gotta do.
Yeah. Oh, committees. Let's spark those up again.
See, it's still there. I've been on that committee a while, so keep me.
It was a critical committee. Yeah, I'm taking them too. I'm just gonna hide. So our discussion of the funding formula and outcomes would not be complete without talking about changes that have happened. So I kind of had to eat my words with our data department, because a couple months ago, I told them data should be getting easier. Our reports haven't changed in a year. They're not going to change. And then they changed. But it is a positive change. So very early on in WIOA, there was a list of measurable skill gains. And we were told in adult education in Title II, these are your measurable skill gains. Don't worry about these other ones. They don't apply to you. So part of this chart might look familiar because it's in our policy manual, but it is cut off. So I'm going to see if I can draw on the screen here. So what we did was we took this part out and we just kept secondary school diploma, and then, sorry, you're going to have to bear with me. Kept the one in the middle. Now, how do I erase stuff? So those were our measurable skill gains. So high school equivalency, which would be GED, or pathway to career now, or ed gain, of which you have a couple of different options. We don't do Carnegie units in Kansas, so we didn't keep that one, but we do pre-post test. We have been counting program exit and entry into post-secondary education within the same year. Octave has kind of backtracked on these. We now have other measurable skill gain options open to us. Only for IET students, though. So if you look at this little note, because I pulled this from the most up-to-date Octave NRS Technical Assistant Guide. So it says, for adult education participants, secondary or post-secondary transcripts, progress towards milestones, and passing technical occupational knowledge-based exams can be used to document NSG only for participants in IET or workplace literacy programs. That might sound a lot like the Walmart grant stuff that we're doing, or AOK at work. It also sounds a lot like AOK, or Hector has a good partnership with Tyson doing their Upward Academy, IET. That also includes a college piece. But for these programs, I know up front, we always told you MSGs are great, pre-post testing is great, having them finish their GED is great, but we have so many employment-based measures. So try not to worry about the MSG. I think I had probably 15 hours of conversations with Kelly specifically about, you can do these things, I promise it's not going to tank your funding. Well, now, even better, because for some of those employer training-based programs, we are now going to be able to count these as MSGs in addition to getting the employment-based measures. So if you're doing a program at a business, and we will talk about these in more detail and give you the exact definitions of progress towards a milestone, or a post-secondary transcript, or what counts as a knowledge-based exam. But that really does open up the opportunity for, if you're in a workplace and someone's doing this as part of their job, you could count that as a measurable skill gain. So your measurable skill gain rate goes up, but they're also already employed. And if you're keeping them at that employer, you're more likely to have an outcome for employed second quarter after exit, employed fourth quarter after exit, which also helps our state, because one of our state measures is effectiveness in serving employers, which is when a student or a participant stays at the same employer during those two time periods. So I think this has a lot of positive ramifications. And so Georgia asked, will they also get an ed gain on top of that? They could, but they wouldn't necessarily have to, because an ed gain is an MSG. So everything is under this measurable skill gain umbrella. So if you were able, depending on how the program's designed, if you were able to log an MSG through one of these other options, your pressure to post test that student goes away, because you could post test them, but from a purely performance measure standpoint, trying to make our percentages go up for programs, trying to increase your funding, there's no value in delivering that post-test if you've logged the MSG somewhere else. There might be instructional value still. Go ahead, Georgia.
So they couldn't get double up on the MSGs. They couldn't get the participation and ed gain. They would have, it's either one or the other.
Yes, unless they have multiple periods of participation.
So if you have a program at a workplace that you have a 10-week session and then you have a second 10-week session and that student is
and it's 90 days apart.
Oh, and it's 90 days apart, then you can double up on the participant, but if it's not 90 days apart, you can't. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I think this is very positive. Karen is trying to ruin it. Karen Ulansky, because she asked how this is going to be counted in ACES. We're working on it. What we do have a jump start because we have been helping Department of Commerce calculate these measures for their participants by doing a data match, because we actually have a data sharing agreement with them. We do a data match and then we look in our post-secondary system to see if students have accomplished some of these things. So we are currently meeting with our data department to see how we can apply that to our own students, which in theory should be easier because it's all in-house. We don't have to data share with another agency. But we might be able to get some of the information from our KEDS database, our post-secondary database at the Board of Regents. This makes the follow-up even more important because you're logging if a student is getting an industry recognized credential. And so we'll have some more discussions about that and what will change. I am hoping that the data collection burden will not increase from what it currently is on local programs, because it's with the follow-up, it's currently very high. I'm hoping that for many of these things, we'll be able to pull it in-house. If someone is doing something specifically, if they're taking a test specifically with an employer that's not reported back to us, you might need to log that on the follow-up, or maybe there's a checkbox or an entry place in ACES. I mean, those are things that we're still trying to figure out because this was just decided within the last month. It may be 2 months because time flies.
Chris, is there going to be more specifics out to us on like what is progress towards milestones? What are the technical and occupation? Okay, good. Thank you.
For this today, I wanted to just give you the chart to visualize. These things are well defined in the WIOA law. And for example, I believe the post-secondary transcript is 12 credit hours. But again, those are things that will be integrated into our policy manual, very specifically defined what these things are, so that you know how to best design your program so that you can take advantage of this and really be able to count. We're already doing a lot of this type of stuff, which is why there was such a huge push nationally. And I know we've had Anson Green come and talk to you all before. He used to be the state director for adult ed in Texas. He now is at Tyson in charge of their Upward Pathways, which is an IET using adult ed at Tyson plants, and their Upward Academy, which several of you have been involved in that. And he really pushed through the Tyson arm for us to be able to count these because it's already in the law. So more details to follow. We will try to make sure that everyone understands these as best we can. I know sometimes we're still talking about ed gains. I do the same thing. But it's all in MSG. How you get there doesn't matter, as long as you're doing it correctly. That being said, AOK funding and the time cop's about to come knocking. I'm really worried about Aaron coming after me.
No, I won't hurt you. You got about 10 minutes.
Thank you. So AOK funding, to switch gears, we're going to talk more about AOK later today. I think most everyone's comfortable with what that model looks like. So I harp all the time, AOK is not the money that's tied to it. AOK is an instructional model that is meant to help underprepared students succeed in a classroom where they otherwise would not have. So we provide them extra assistance. We team teach. We have a career navigator. We hold their hand, because it's my belief in education that we are supposed to help people achieve, not stand there and say, well, they didn't make it, so they just didn't try hard enough. So step off the soapbox. That's the model. In Kansas, we do have funds tied to that for a specific population of students that qualify for AOK. So when you're talking about AOK as a model, anyone qualifies as long as they need extra assistance. Even if they don't, they could be in the same classroom, receiving that dual instruction, succeeding, helping others succeed. In Kansas, we have funding available.
Hello?
Hold on a second. We hear you.
I need a boot.
Oh no, Linda needs a boot. So we have funding available for a very specific population that qualifies for AOK. So individuals without a high school diploma qualify for AOK proviso funding. It is called the AOK proviso because we have an overall, in 2012, we passed some legislation called SB 155, which is known as Excel in CTE, which provides funding for high school students to take tiered technical education courses at a community or technical college. As a proviso, budget proviso, to that funding amount, I think we're currently around $30 million total for that. As a proviso, there is $500,000 that is specifically no less than $500,000, specifically set aside for AOK students. So that would be adults without a high school diploma enrolled in an AOK pathway. The AOK proviso will pay for their tuition for the tiered technical courses in an AOK pathway. So a tiered course is one that has been determined to be a little bit more expensive and is definitely technical in nature. So sometimes you'll have a course in a pathway that's not tiered. So usually any type of math class isn't going to have that tiered designation. But welding does, CNA, CMA, automotive technology courses. Those are the types that are tiered and will be paid for by the AOK proviso. One thing to note, the usage of that AOK proviso has been going down over time. We need to make sure that we're using it as much as possible, or that proviso could go away and we would lose our ability to tap that. That has not been discussed to my knowledge, but that's something to be aware of down the line. I do think that pathway to career and being able to use that AOK pathway as a means to getting someone their Kansas State high school diploma, I think that will help increase usage. But I want to make sure everyone knows that we need to be using it as much as possible. So like I said, we call it the proviso. because it's that budget proviso language. We've had a lot of questions about when it stops. So AOK proviso funding is specifically for individuals who don't have a high school diploma, but our programs are meant to get them their high school diploma, finish the GED with pathway to career. They can't get the diploma until they're finished with their AOK pathway anyway. But if you have someone taking the GED, I know there is a lot of confusion about when we stop paying for those courses. So I've put here, we will pay for students courses in their pathway up through the term in which they finish and they receive their GED. So in this example, if a student passed their final GED test on January 1st, that is the spring term, we would pay for AOK proviso courses up through the end of spring. It's not likely they would take it on January 1st. More than likely, they're going to take it maybe in February, which would be partway through the semester. We don't just stop paying for courses mid-semester. We stop at the end. When your institution reports that a student passed the GED, we don't even, on that funding report, we don't get the date. We get a term. So it would be fall, spring, or summer of an academic year. So as long as they're still taking courses in that term, we'll pay for that. David, you have a question?
Yeah, Chris, forgive me for interrupting. Something stood out to me, and we're working through this here at Kansas City, Kansas, with a handful of folks. We're pushing this. We find there's a ton of value in this, so we're pushing this with a lot of our GED students. And I really don't mean to split hairs, but I want to understand this exactly. Under your slide there, you have it as tuition reimbursement, and we understand it's a waiver. And I just looked at the manual, and in the manual, I read it as a waiver as well. Is there a difference?
Well, it depends on what side you're on.
Is it a reimbursement to the college? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in our AOK specific presentation, but your institution, all your institutions who have currently signed up for AOK agreed. Your president signed an assurance document that says for students in that pathway, your institution will waive the tuition associated with that. You will then report to us the courses they took, and we will reimburse your institution. So for you, for KCK, it's a waiver. For us, it's a reimbursement. So it's the two sides of the transaction.
I understand. Thank you for clarifying,
yep.
Chris.
But I say that with such vehemence because I know we have some institutions that kind of hold the value on a student's account until they get the payment from us. And that's great. I mean, part of that just gets chalked up to business practice. How do you determine where the money gets allotted? But I know, especially when I started this program at Barton, we had students getting collection notices because Barton hadn't actually waived the tuition. They waited until KAEA paid them, and then they zeroed out the student's account. And the main purpose of that is that the student doesn't pay the tuition for the course. But that's something to keep in mind, that the institution is supposed to waive that, and then we pay you on our special collection timeline. So I have to talk really fast because Aaron's about to nudge me.
I was going to say, if you want to keep going now, or if you want to pick this up after or in your AOK section.
Yeah.
And pick up from this slide maybe.
Yep, and I just found a place on here where I forgot to update the slides.
That gives you a chance to do that.
Yeah. So we can, let me see how many slides I have. Let me maybe go real quick. We'll skip over maybe the AOK part. We do have a new AOK TANF DCF agreement that's in the works that I'd like to talk about and actually list a few of the TANF grantees there, because it expands the eligibility criteria from what we had previously. Incentive funds, we'll talk about this in the AOK section because GED Accelerator is tied to AOK in a way, and these are the incentive funds for your institution to have these programs. One of the things I wanted to cover specifically in this section, and we'll probably hit on it again this afternoon during our allowability discussion. We've had some questions about Spanish language GED courses. That's not allowed using your adult ed basic funds. So we do get into what falls in that range this afternoon, but if you have it listed on your budget as federal, state, or local, it follows the same rules. So for example, Spanish language GED wouldn't be allowed. These incentive funds or the excess AOK proviso funds, if your program gets to keep part of those based on an agreement with your institution, I say these don't have strings, but those don't fall under the same guidelines as your AFLA funds, your federal, state, local money. So those could, in theory, be used to fund something that would otherwise be unallowable. So if you want to instruct in another language, Spanish is the most popular with a lot of our programs because it's hard to learn English and also study for your high school equivalency at the same time, especially when you're allowed to take that test in Spanish. So that's something that could be funded with some of those incentive funds or with other local funds that aren't listed as a match. Kelly Mowbray is really good at that. I know I've been picking on her a lot today. But some of you receive money, mill levy money. If you're not using it as a match, it doesn't have to follow EDGAR guidelines. You'd still have to follow your institutional guidelines. And if you were doing something like Spanish language GED, you would need to make sure that you could demonstrate that separation between your AFLA funded activities and that. But that is something that you could pay for with some of those other funds. Just to let you know, for FY 2022, KBOR is exploring the idea of doing a statewide contract for an adult ed online curriculum like Edmentum or Aztec. So that's something to think of as we develop budgets. We don't know what or when. That RFP process is sometimes arduous, but that is something that we're exploring doing down the line so that local programs wouldn't necessarily have to do that. But I would plan for next year to have in place what you would want in case an RFP takes too much time. But we can talk about that a little bit later. We are planning on doing an ad campaign for GED, Finish Your GED, GED Adult Education. I know we'll have some more details about that. And then here's the spoiler I gave you at the beginning. FY 2022 funding allocations will be out by the end of April. Questions? Everyone wants to get a break.
That's right. Everybody's ready for a break. So let's see, we're at 10:19. Is everybody okay with a quick 6-minute break? Can we be back at 10:25? Keep us on schedule. Okay, I see no objections. Let's go. We'll come back at 10:25. So see you in a bit.
Let me call our order bin. Oh.
Mary's getting lunch.
What?
Somebody had their microphone on.
Sorry, Mary.
Oh, he went away. All right. Hey, everybody. We're at 10:25. So sorry for the quick break. We'll try to keep on schedule today. So we'll let everybody just join for a minute and I'll share my screen. And Lisa and I will talk about AOK at work.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We will just start with introducing ourselves. My name is Lisa Beck, for those of you that are not familiar, and I'm Associate Director of Workforce Development, working with the AOK at Work grant, and also some program alignment. And as Connie mentioned, a little bit of a jack of all trades, maybe master of none, I guess. So Erin, how about you?
No, too hard on herself. No, I'm Erin, project coordinator working on AOK at Work and also other adult education fun projects.
All right, so what is AOK at Work? And Erin, if you can go to our next slide and you want control for me, that'd be great. For those, again, that are not familiar with this program, it is a grant from Walmart that we got in 2019. And the original end date was August of 2020. And it became apparent that we were not going to be able to spend all of our funds by that time. So we requested a no-cost extension from Walmart, and they approved that with no problem for another year. And that would have been August of 2021 would have been the end date. During that time, of course, COVID, everything came to a screeching halt and everything closed down, no more training in the workplace. So again, we're not going to be able to spend the money by that time frame. So we're asking for another no cost extension to June 1st of 2022, and feel confident that that's going to be approved. We've got to get this money spent. So what AOK at Work is employees that pursue their education at the workplace for education and skills for the workplace, English language, maybe some high school diploma, maybe some other training that the employer needs. This is all customized to the employer. Next. So how does this program work? Well, the adult ed and the local employer will partner together, and the employer will provide the industry vocabulary and situational examples to use in the curriculum so that the employees can use that information right away in their day-to-day work. And they should also provide employee materials, a handbook, maybe a safety manual, any other pieces of information that the employee would have that they could help learn that vocabulary if they need to. And they should provide a training space because we want to have it on site at the employer's location. And they can also provide any employee incentives. That is not a requirement, but it just helps keep the employer engaged and helps incentivize the employees to continue with the program and complete. So maybe a gift card at the end of the completion, maybe a dinner for the group once they complete the program. We've had that done. And then the adult ed provider provides the following at no cost to the employer or the employee. Because of the Walmart grant, we'll pay for all these things. Customized curriculum development, using, of course, that industry vocabulary, the situational examples, and the academic instruction, career navigation services, and any credential attainment costs. So what does the student have to pay? Nothing. What does the employer have to pay for? Nothing. What do you have to pay for? Nothing. This is a great opportunity for everyone involved. So how do you get to these people? How do you get to these employers? Well, even the most casual conversation or observation can give you a lead to an employer. Maybe you're at a restaurant and you notice that the employees might need some training. So you go to the manager and ask, hey, could your employers use some additional training? We can help with that. Or you're at a hotel and you notice that many of the employees, the staff, don't speak English. So you go to the manager and say, hey, could your employees use some English language instruction? We can help you with that. And Tobias Wood was at a Russell Stover gift shop a candy store, and he happened to ask, hey, how many of your employees don't have their GED? And the manager said, oh, most of them. And said, wow, we've got the program that will work for that. So just your everyday life, you can pick up some leads. And when it's for free for everyone, it's got to help convince them. Then this provides you with all of those working adults that haven't had the time or the money to further their education. You can eliminate those barriers and bring the education to them and change their lives forever, which is what you're in the business to do. And for you, the provider, you don't have to wait for students to come to you. So your numbers can grow. So again, win-win for everyone involved. Okay. So what type of industries are eligible? Well, Walmart started off with wanting us to use retail and service sector industries. So retail, hospitality, food service, tourism as examples. We've had some really good luck with hotels, casinos, restaurants, convention centers, retail stores, a medical center, and nursing homes. Those are just some of the ones that the providers that have already been in this program have used, and it just works really very well. Now with COVID, we've had some things stop, and we've had some problem getting back into some of those locations. Nursing homes still won't allow their trainers back in, so it still might be a little bit more time. So we asked Walmart, can we expand the types of sectors? And they said yes. We asked for manufacturing and construction to be added, so we'll be able to provide training and instruction to those industries as well. Now, they don't want those to be the main source of our program, but we can add those in a little bit. So if there's any other industries that you're interested in serving, just let Erin and I know, and we will check into it and see if it can be done. Because again, we've got this money, we need to spend it. It's a great service and a great opportunity for everyone.
Great. And to market the program, we worked with a design company here in Topeka to develop a logo for AOK at Work and a few marketing materials. So we have a couple of poster examples that could be used and are geared towards employers. So here's the first one. And then this is the second one that we have. The posters just very briefly touch on AOK at Work and how adult educators will tailor the educational program to fit the needs of both the employers and their employees. And also these can be customized for your program. We can put your name and contact information on them. And also once we send them to you, you're welcome to put your own logo on them. So it looks like it's from your agency. So however you want to customize them, you can let us know. In addition to the posters, we have FAQ flyers to share more detail about the program. The examples in the slides include an FAQ for employers, and also there's one for adult education providers. Flyers give the highlights of the program. What is AOK at Work? How does the program work? How much does it cost? How to get started and more. Just a nice one-page sheet to give the overview of it. And as with the posters, you can customize these flyers as well so that it has your information, and you can add your logo, same as before, so that it looks like it's from your program, but it also has that AOK at Work logo on it. And if you would be interested in getting the flyers or the posters, please feel free to reach out to Lisa or to me. Our contact information is here on this slide. I think y'all know how to get a hold of us, but we'd be more than happy to help you customize them or send them out so that you can customize them, just as another way to help you get your foot in the door. It gives you something to hand to an employer if you show up, and if you know, a good introduction, a good highlight reel of what the program is. With that, we would open it up for questions. If anybody has questions, I know that's a lot of information and some exciting changes. We're really excited about the changes and the longer time frame. So,
Lisa, I'm assuming it still includes, this is Mary Jo Hanning from Highland. I'm assuming it still includes hospitals?
Yes, yes, it does.
So, okay, we may be lucky.
Yay, good, good.
I've been trying this for 2 years.
Yes, I know you have. I know you have.
We might
Now's
be
the time. It's going to work this time.
Okay. Third time's a charm.
That's right. That's right. Eric, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, more of a comment than a question. And that's just that I know that everyone's like, oh my gosh, we're so busy. Who could we talk to out there that would have businesses that, are looking to we can maybe partner with? I would just encourage us to always remember our Chamber of Commerce in our towns and our cities, people who are in the business of working with other people. And it's amazing how small the world can really be. And so-and-so knows somebody who needs someone. And it could be a perfect fit for one of our students. So just don't forget your Chamber of Commerce folks.
And that's a good point, Eric. Also, the workforce development centers are also an excellent place to go check and see if they know some employers that could use this service.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for that addition. I wanted to say too, we wanted to give a quick shout out to the institutions who have participated so far. We really appreciate the time and the hard work that everyone has put in, especially with trying to deal with the challenges of the last year. You guys really hung in there. So big thanks to Butler and to Colby, Dodge City, Paola, and Washburn Tech. You guys have done fantastic. It's been so great to learn with you guys, and hopefully, you all can encourage more institutions to keep doing this work. And we get so excited when we have success stories come out of the program. And I know there are several projects in the works, and we're excited for what you all are going to come up with. So please holler if there's any questions or anything that we can do to help you. We're happy to get on a call with you if that will help with a business, or eventually when we can get out again, we'd love to show up and help you in person as well. So
right. And we, we're happy, like Aaron says, happy to help you sell this to them if that's what it takes. And we would also like to let you know that we have a session on AOK at Work that will give you a little bit more information, more in detail about all this information. We've got some great heartwarming stories to tell you of successes from this program. It's really, really great. Such a good program.
Lisa, we do have a question from Maria in the chat. She says she has a couple of Hispanic businesses asking if we can do this in Spanish for their employees. And can it be done in Spanish?
So we'll check for you, Maria, on that to make sure that that's okay. It seems like it would be, but we'll make sure that that's okay to do it in Spanish. And Bill has a question, I think.
Yeah, but functionally, these students, we would still enter them in ACES and get gains and everything from them.
Yes,
Just
we
like if they were enrolled in our regular classes.
They have a checkbox to note them as being an AOK at Work student so that we can run numbers on those later on for our reports to Walmart. So yes, they go in ACES, you get your numbers, you get your counts. So it's helpful for your numbers as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yes.
And if it's something you're interested in participating in, we do have a short RFP that we can send to you to fill out, just kind of brief information about what your plans are. And we also ask for a letter of commitment from the business, because we want to know that they are committed to doing this. And there's a template letter that we have for that as well that we could send to you.
Also in the RFP, it did mention about doing a team, AOK style of teaching, the team training. Well, we don't have to have the employer being involved in the training with the instructor, but it's helpful to have maybe the trainer, the HR person, or for some of the classes, it would be helpful to have those people there as the experts on those things to talk about maybe some things in the employee manual, or talk about some of the health or safety issues that they might have at the plant. So yeah, you can use the employers there in that way if you want to. You don't have to, but it can be helpful. We just want the employer to be engaged in some fashion, since there's not money involved. We want them to, they want them to have some skin in the game somehow.
Eric's taken over my time cop duty, telling me I have a minute, which is now up. So Lisa said we have another session tomorrow. It'll be a bit longer, some more detail in that. So you're welcome to join us tomorrow, or really anytime you have questions, just holler at us and we'll be happy to help and keep this program going. And with that, it is back to Mr. Lemon. I will stop.
Yay.
Well, thank you from the AOK at Work crew. Let me try to get my shares going. So don't panic, but we're going to go back. We're going to resume my previous set of slides so that we can briefly talk about two things. One is the AOK TANF DCF partnership. Those of you who have been doing AOK or remember AOK as it was in 2015, 2016, we had an AOK TANF partnership that was great because we had $2.1 million that we could use. It would pay for all the courses. It didn't matter if a student did or did not have a high school diploma. It was a really great source of funds. The problem was that the qualifying criteria were very restrictive. Individuals had to qualify for TANF assistance even if they weren't receiving it, which means that they would be earning a very, very small amount of money. And it's something that they could transition out of very quickly once they got a job. So we have been in discussions with DCF to sort of revive that partnership. We actually put together a proposal a little over a year ago to do something similar, and they happened to reach out to us and want to expand. What it does this time is include, in general, anyone who's served by a TANF grantee, and you can see my awesome note there to actually put a few of them in, which I forgot to do. I'm sure no one has forgotten to update their Zoom before the PowerPoints, but what I could do even better is include and show you now the attachment that would give you an idea of who some of these TANF grantees are who could be referring individuals. Now I will blanket disclaimer, this agreement has not been signed. All of the details have not been hammered out yet, but we want you to be aware that this could be coming. So this would include JAG Kansas, Convection Success, Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. So these are TANF grantees. So in general, anyone served by one of these organizations would qualify for this pot of money to be able to pay for AOK pathways, the courses in those pathways. We're also pushing them to be able to pay for some of those barriers to participation, childcare, transportation. Like I said, those things are still being worked out, but we're very excited about this because there's a very similar program in Arkansas that's shown a lot of success with vulnerable families, being able to get them in, actually pay to take out some of the barriers to their participation. Scott Smathers would tell you that sometimes it's a lot easier to find money to pay for someone's class than it is to find money to pay for someone's childcare or to pay for their transportation. So we're hoping to be able to put all those things in place. And again, this is a very broad list of grantees. So being able to serve most anyone who is in contact and being served by these organizations, I think will be a big deal and really allow us to expand that TANF DCF partnership in a way that we weren't able to before. Even though we had a lot of money to apply to it, we didn't have a lot of students. This is actually going to maybe be the opposite this time. Initially, we're talking about not a lot of money, maybe $75,000 up front to see, but if we spend through it, there might be an opportunity to expand that in the future. So this is something to keep in mind as you talk to organizations in your communities. If you don't already have a partnership or familiarity with these organizations near you, you might look at that and see if that's something that you can develop ahead of time so that we can start bringing in those students. If you're already receiving individuals who are served by these organizations, this is something to keep in mind as we move forward, how you can design programs that get them into training, get them the education they need to get a career so that they can elevate themselves and their families. So that was me adding a few. We'll go back to the funding piece here for just a moment. There were a couple things I wanted to talk about because it's difficult to talk about AOK, even though that model is not the funds tied to it. There may be a quiz later. We do have GED Accelerator incentive funds that apply for individuals without a high school diploma enrolled in adult ed who are co-enrolled, that's important, co-enrolled in a CTE program. So if you have a student receiving AOK proviso funds, they would qualify as students where your institution could receive the incentive funds. Those funds are $1,000 for the first industry recognized credential. There is a credential list. OSHA 10 is not on the list. CNA, CMA, AWS credentials, American Welding Society, some of the automotive credentials. For the first one a student receives, your institution would get a $1,000 incentive. A credential is not an academic award. Just because it says certificate in the name, if your welding program is a 16-hour Cert A, it is not a certificate in the industry recognized credential sense. The underlying AWS credentials a student receives, those count. But if you have a pathway that doesn't have an industry recognized credential, you will not ever receive the $1,000, even when a student completes that program. Because an academic award, a Cert A, is merely a designation that we use when we talk about stacking programs. A Cert A is a certain number of credit hours, a Cert B adds on top of that, a Cert C, building all the way to an associate's. Your institution doesn't have to have all of those. You could have an associate's without a lower level program designation. You could have a Cert A without having an associate's. But just because it says certificate in the academic award name does not make it an industry recognized credential. I know there's been some confusion around that in the past. So that's the $1,000 incentive. $500 is for when a student passes their 4th GED test and they are conferred that document. Also, after a student takes all 4 GED tests, you qualify for a $170 incentive that is supposed to be meant to cover the cost of that student's GED. The same language is not in there necessarily for this, for the 170. That amount has not been updated in a couple of years. It used to cover 4 GED tests and 2 retakes. Now I think it falls slightly short of that. But this was meant to pay for that student's tests. It's kind of in, David asked the question earlier about the waiver versus reimbursement. That 170 was supposed to be that same concept where the institution pays for the tests up front, we reimburse them later. So that 170 is the only amount that was meant to benefit the student directly. The 1,000 and the 500 are meant to be incentives to the institution for running the programs. Data for AOK Proviso and GED Accelerator must be reported during your institution's special collection. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Timing is crucial here as well. GED Accelerator is for students who are co-enrolled between adult ed, get the GED credential, co-enrolled with that CTE program. If they finish that CTE program and then 6 months later they take the GED, you may not receive funds for that. So in general, it needs to be within the same collection period. We'll talk about that a little bit more too, but you need to remember that GED accelerator funds are for students who are co-enrolled. So you have a little leeway with the timing. But I know this was something that we did with Cowley recently, where the students took the GED test too far after they had completed the CTE program, and Cowley did not receive those incentive funds. So we want to make sure that that's not something that pops up very often. Sometimes timing is difficult, but it's something to keep in mind when you're having students test. And as much as you can control when they take the test, do that to make sure that you're taking advantage of those funds for your institution. So with that, we will hop over to talk more about AOK, where it's going to feel a bit like I'm repeating myself. Get back to Zoom. So Accelerating Opportunity Kansas may be a new term for all of you. So one of the things I know, we've had institutions who have sort of participated, not participated, participated over the years. If you want to know how to get involved, at this point, I think we counted up yesterday and we have, of our 19 community colleges and 7 technical colleges, I think we have 6 institutions who have not signed assurances to be able to do Accelerating Opportunity Kansas. If you are one of those institutions, Cloud has not yet, but I know Debbie has been talking about starting doing AOK. So there's an assurance document that talks a little bit about the things that you'll do, like waive tuition for students and wait for the state to reimburse you. The minimum 25% of a pathway that has to be co-taught, some of those things, that's the assurance document. So if you want to know how your institution can get involved, reach out to us. If you don't already have that document as an institution, we will make sure that you get that in place. If your institution has that document, but you're still not sure how to get your institution involved, we are willing to sit down with you, president, vice president, your dean of CTE, talk about what you need to do, have to do to make this work. Also, like I said earlier, it oftentimes seems like it's the money that's the most confusing. Institutions aren't quite sure how they're going to get paid, what they have to do to get paid. And so we can walk through that too and explain that to them. But every single institution in the state is doing as much Excel in CTE with the high school students as they possibly can. And the numbers that we pay the institutions are large. And the funding works exactly the same. So it's the same time frame. It's more or less the same data fields from the same data system. So they know how to do it. It's sometimes just getting over that, looking at the students as an entirely different population. It's really the same type of program. It's just these students are in high school and don't have a high school diploma. These students aren't in high school, they're at adult ed, but they also don't have a high school diploma. So we can have those conversations. Uh-oh. Maybe, maybe not, Jennifer. I'll get with you. I saw an email, so maybe I misspoke, but we could talk more about that later. So if you want to know how to get involved, we'll talk to a little bit about that process, from a high level, but if you need to have conversations at your institution about doing it, about getting the money, we are more than happy to facilitate those conversations. So as far as AOK, what do you need to know? So there's a model, there's recruitment, there are pathways, policies, procedures, institutional issues. We have an AOK handbook for that. We're in the process of making some additional updates now that Pathway to Career is here. When we updated the handbook last year, we were still working on the rules and regulations. So now that that's here, Sue has processed a couple, looking at the documentation. We can update that so that we know that we've got the best information to you.
Tennis shoes with arches.
Already. So what we're going to do is actually look at the AOK handbook, kind of step through some of those things. And kind of talk a little bit about, you know, that main source document, what questions you might have that aren't answered there. So going through the AOK handbook, this is on our website or adult ed resources page. So if you go to kansasregents.org, academic affairs, adult education, adult ed resources, under accelerating opportunity, the handbook is here. Open that up. This was a freebie logo that we got when Lisa and Aaron did the AOK at work marketing materials. They strong-armed the marketing company and made them give this to us for free. So thank them. You go through, we have some contents. We're going to try to quickly go through pretty much the entire handbook. So looking at time again. Some of this we've already talked about a little bit today, but the introduction, really what we want to make clear in the document and to you and to your institutions is that AOK is not the money that's attached to it. Say it 3 times. AOK is not the funding that is available for a particular set of students. So AOK is an integrated education and training model. It's a partnership between your adult ed program and a CTE program of your choosing. And it's designed to help students complete career pathways, earn industry recognized credentials, begin careers, get good jobs, make good money, elevate themselves and their families. Within that overarching model, we do have funding that's available for students that might serve as a bridge funding while it's difficult for them to get federal financial aid. That can help your institution get some incentive funds to help fund some of the extra instructional costs that are associated with doing this, because you do need 2 instructors in the CTE classroom at least part of the time. So some of the general guidelines for the AOK model are that CTE courses are team taught with a basic skills instructor. Blueprint reading, you have another instructor who helps cover measurements, fractions, adding, multiplying, subtracting, all of those basic skills, reinforcing those in the CTE classroom to make sure that students can succeed. Pathways would be a minimum of 12 hours. Most of our pathways are at least 16, and they need to be in high demand or high wage occupations. We'll talk about that in a minute, where you could find what Kansas's current high demand and or high wage occupations are. Your institution needs to provide wraparound support services. So you need to, this is where the career navigator comes into play. That's a person who can be there a little bit to hold the student's hand, navigate an academic post-secondary setting, because these individuals are likely undereducated, underprepared, first-generation college students. They have no idea what a college is, how it functions, who a registrar is, why that's different than the business office, even though they're often in the same building next to each other. It's our job with these programs to make sure students succeed. We can't just sit as these ivory towers on the hill and expect students to come to us, get some knowledge in their head, and leave successful. Supplemental instructions provided. So you might have extra tutoring. You might do some of these courses as the co-requisite model is a really popular model right now for students who are underprepared, where they're in, on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, they're in the normal class, maybe with that team teaching instructor providing support. And then Tuesday, Thursday, maybe they're in a supplemental course that helps reinforce that, gives them homework help, builds in those supports so that the students don't fall through the cracks. And we just chalk it up to natural attrition. That being said, I won't go through this word for word. Student qualifications, we do have some designations on who would qualify for AOK. Generally, if they're qualifying for adult ed, they're qualifying for AOK. We've had some discussions in the past. What is too low? So previously we had, if they were an NRS level 4 or above, they could participate in AOK. Then we changed to TABE 11 and 12, and we don't have very many students who are level 4 and above. Most of our students are levels 1, 2, and 3. They're the same type of students we always had. It's just the test is more academically rigorous. So we have some recommendations for students that you place into these programs, but you know your students better than we do. And sometimes students don't test well. You need to use your program's judgment when placing someone below the cut scores that are here into class, but you can do that. If you know the student and you know based on the supports you're providing that they'll succeed in the class, you can place them in there. But absolutely do not just put a student in a course that they're going to get for free, not provide them the support they need to succeed, because you're doing yourself and the student a disservice. So just be mindful of that. Again, AOK doesn't have to have its own course section. They can be integrated with students who aren't receiving AOK services. You can co-teach in a class with high school students. We can't serve high school students directly, but if you have a mixed class, it's fine if your co-teacher is also assisting other students who aren't in adult ed in that class. And then at the end, we'll try to talk maybe about some specific institutional issues. As far as AOK pathways have to be at least 12 credit hours. And with the exception of healthcare, they need to be currently approved program with an exit point. So you can't offer welding if your institution doesn't have a welding program. With healthcare, what we have allowed institutions to do is to piece together a pathway out of usually CNA, CMA, something else. We'll talk a little bit more about the career pathway identification and how you apply for a new pathway at the end. AOK requirements, at least 25% of the pathway needs to be co-taught. It's not 25% of every single class. You can front load co-teaching. You can co-teach 100% of classes in the first semester. You can co-teach 100% of a 3 or 4 credit hour class and then not co-teach other ones. We allow you to decide where that's best placed. Where you should figure out where that's going to be placed is when you're developing your common set of learning objectives. Talk about that a little bit later too. But when you're developing your common set of learning objectives, that is an opportunity for your instructor, your basic skills instructor, to sit down with a CTE instructor or a CTE program leader and talk about where's the best opportunity for linkage. So where can you best enhance the instruction by adding in that basic skills piece? Is it in, blueprint reading? Is it in basic life saving? I mean, there's a lot of places, and that's why we're kind of vague on what the common set of learning objectives should look like. But this is you basically telling us, what adult ed content are you teaching where? What specific workforce prep activities are included? I have a definition of that when we go back to the slides. And then what occupational training is included in the AOK program? What job are you preparing students for? That pops up again on the pathway application. Team teaching models. This is just an overview of what the different team teaching models are. You're not required to use any specific one during a class. This is merely informational so that you can kind of decide what works best, what day, what course, because again, you're the instructional experts. You're the ones who know what the students need based on the students in the courses, based on your institution, based on the program. We're not trying to tell you what to do. We're just making this information available so that you can take advantage of it. For career navigation, we do have state standards for Career Navigator. Those are on our website. But that's something that you should be doing with these students. During the original AOK grant, we had a lot of specific navigators. That was their only job, or maybe that was only one of 2 jobs. I know we still have some places where that exists. Some places it's been absorbed by 1 or 2 people, but you should really be talking with your students, making sure that they're going to class, that they have everything they need. You're helping them navigate the system. You're helping them get the training they need, and then trying to link them with resources so that they can get employed when they're done. So for high school equivalency, we have 2 options. We have the GED, and then we have Kansas Pathway to Career. This is what we'll be updating here over the next weeks and months with some of the specific criteria, but that Kansas Pathway to Career is a list of requirements a student has to meet, one of them being the completion of an approved AOK pathway, paired with the civics exam, a silver National Career Readiness Certificate. It's not called Work Keys anymore. Silver or above, and a few other milestones to be able to receive the Kansas State High School Diploma. Eric would like you to know as well that navigation is a key component of the PAM, which he will be talking about later. So again, that pathway to career is really a way to take students on a straight path from education, training, high school equivalency, career, without having to kind of take a left turn to finish off their last GED test, or what we often saw is not finishing their GED at all, going and getting a job till the economy turns down, and then they're the first to let go because they have the lowest education. Or maybe down the line, they need to switch careers and now they don't have a high school diploma. So they have to go back, get that, and then go back to some other training. We talked a little bit about the funding already, so I won't hit on this super hard. We do have the ability to use ability to benefit, which would allow students without a high school diploma to use their Pell Grant if they're otherwise eligible. But that would be an exception done at the institution level. We have been exploring how we would do a statewide exception It seems like the Department of Education is not easing up, but they're becoming more familiar with doing those applications. We now have, I think, 3 states who did a statewide exemption for ability to benefit, which Washington State being one of them, where their all their IBEST programs qualified. So we'll be exploring that. But it is something that your individual institution could use to pay for that if the student doesn't have a high school diploma. We talked about AOK Proviso, AOK TANF, that DCF partnership that is coming, that will kind of expand the existing eligibility. So for the institution, your AFLA grant can support the basic skills instructor. I know we've harped a lot on changing what your instructional model is now that adult ed is viewed by the feds as an employment program. It's just that we're an employment program that delivers education first. The GD Accelerator incentive funds, the data piece. So you need to record the AOK data in that AOK tab in ACES, where you would talk about the things you're doing. You're talking about this when the students get their credential, the measurable skill gain, which now that Octave has opened this up a little bit, everyone who's in an AOK pathway would qualify for one of those alternative MSGs. So we'll be putting that in here when we update the policy manual, that will have some of those specific designations. I'm going to skip over KEDS. That's where your institution uploads the post-secondary data for every student. The special collection is a piece that that is important, and that's often where we see issues and or friction, because institutions don't understand what they need to do to report to us, or the adult ed program doesn't understand what the institution needs as far as data. The most important thing is that you need to be talking to your institutional research person that does this report. And I would recommend looking at those students together. When they upload their data, they are able to see who is tentatively funded and who's not before they submit lock and the collection's over and it's too late to make changes. So you can see if X student, start early. That is, Matt Cannell is shouting that to everyone, and that is the best advice we could give, is that you need to not wait until the day it's due to figure out that you have data problems. Because if you do that, our ability to help you is not very big. We have done it before. It's not fun for anyone involved. But if you start early, your IR person can see who's funded and who's not. And if you're seeing people that aren't funded, some of the reasons are a social security number mismatch between ACES and KEDS, the documents that your IR department's uploading. Several years ago, we changed the proxy SSNs, the institutional assigned SSN numbers that start with an A for students who either don't have or haven't given us a social security number. KEDS will take those, but that means that the number that you have given a student in ACES needs to be the number that the institution reports on the special collection. What they have historically done is if a student doesn't have or doesn't give a social security number to the institution, they report 9 zeros. If your institution did that if Erin didn't give her social security number to you or the post-secondary institution, and you gave her A12021234, but your institution reports 9 zeros on the special collection, Erin's not funded. They'll have to change that 9 zeros to that A number, and that's listed there. Also, some timing issues have occurred where a student did summer courses, but they finished summer courses, they finished in adult ed, they didn't roll over to the next fiscal year. The student won't be funded unless they're present in ACES during the year where they're reported. Because for every academic year, which follows a fiscal year calendar. So for example, we stopped reporting for FY20 June 30th. Our reports were due, everything was done, done and locked by August. Next year, it's going to be end of July. So for our post-secondary institutions, they don't actually have to finish their end of year for 2020 report until somewhere around the October time. September, it's actually September now. So sometimes you would have students who took AOK courses in the summer that weren't reported until September, which means they're not in the current ACES year. So we've always told you for those students who took AOK summer courses, simply roll them over in ACES, no attendance date, no hours. They just need to be present so that we can match that data. So that is covered there under fiscal year, academic year. If your institution has specific questions about who qualifies and who doesn't, we can talk through that, because sometimes institutions hear from another institution that this is true and it may not be. And Jennifer, would you mind telling me what your career to work students, which ones those are?
Yeah, so the students, I have 9 students that just completed the manufacturing tech career to work program out at the prison. And they'll all have their high school diploma through, alternative means. And so my IR person is concerned because the only question she sees says GED, yes or no. And so she's worried that if she checks yes, she's not being truthful, because it's not necessarily through the GED. It's, a combination of things. So I don't know.
Is that for the GED accelerator funds?
No, it's for AOK.
AOK proviso? Well, they don't have their GED.
Right.
So,
but if you don't mark that, they're not marked as completing.
So are you talking about getting the AOK proviso funds or the GED accelerator money?
AOK proviso funds using career to work. So they have their, some of them have their work ready that qualifies them for the English requirement. They took the civics test. They have their math requirement.
So they'll be doing the pathway to career.
Yes.
To get their high school equivalency.
Right.
Which means they don't have a high school diploma yet, so they qualify for accelerating opportunity. So AOK proviso would still pay.
Would still pay or not still pay?
Would still.
Right.
Because they don't have a high school diploma. For the GED accelerator, we need to talk about that. So let's touch base. I don't think there's an issue.
Okay.
But if we need to.
Yeah, because she's doing it now. So,
Yeah, because the
need to make
special
sure
collection's
it's right.
due soon. So let's set a time for us to touch base. And I know there were several emails between KBOR staff and Cowley yesterday.
Okay.
Like 7 of them. So,
awesome.
but I thought at the end of the day we were good. So let's take a look at that again, and then we can touch base and make sure that everything's good to go.
Okay,
But
great.
I don't think there's an issue.
All righty. Thank you.
I got 10 minutes. So career pathway. So if we think back to that we've gone over very quickly what AOK is, maybe kind of sort of how you do it. I think the how you do it, you have to figure out what pathway you're going to actually do. So the example pathway in the AOK handbook is for a welding pathway that is based on an institution's welding program, kind of how you would fill this out, listing the industry credentials obtained. I will again say the award level and credit hours. Oh, someone filled this out wrong. So the award level here would be Cert A. The credit hours would be 16. Industry recognized credentials. Again, your Cert A is not an industry recognized credential. That is an academic award. That is an academic designation used by Kansas institutions to sort of denote. So Cert A is here. Cert B is a little more. Cert C is a little more. Associate's degree is a little bit more. So again, if you're thinking about those incentive dollars, you can absolutely have an AOK pathway that doesn't have an industry recognized credential, but you need to have a really good reason. Sometimes there's not an underlying credential. I know we have some, Garden City has one that's sort of a food processing, meat packing industry program that doesn't have an underlying credential. So you can run that if you're okay, but you will never get the $1,000 incentive for that. You will also need, we'll do that here in a second. So you need to look at the industry recognized credentials, make sure that you understand that, but your Cert A, Cert B is not industry recognized. We're gonna go to the Kansas Department of Labor website here in a minute, but we ask you to provide some basic information on occupation demand, the wages someone can expect. I know we often talk about the top end of welding where, oh, if you're willing to travel, you can make 6 figures. The median wage in Kansas for welders is $40,000. Still a very good wage, especially at the looking at an entry level for not a long-term program. But you need to look at that. You need to look at wages for the state, look at wages for your local area. Sometimes it differs significantly depending on what other businesses you have in your area. You need to give us your entrance criteria, your TABE assessment scores that would be required. If you're not requiring them, you might need to provide a short explanation why. For your courses, you need to list all the courses that are in your pathway, which would be the courses in your program. So here we have welding safety, OSHA 30, blueprint. Chris Stanier wrote in the chat earlier that designation between a tiered and non-tiered class is important. So of the courses listed here, this business 250 obtaining employment, that's not tiered. AOK Proviso is not paying for that course. So you would need to find another way, either get the institution to waive it, because most of our institutions are charging a regular student about $100 to $140 a credit hour. For a welding class, they are being paid about $250 a credit hour, sometimes $300. Those designations change by course every year a little bit because that information gets updated. But I would strongly lobby your institution that if a student completes all these courses, that they throw this one course in for free, because they are getting way more money in this reimbursement than they would be if this student were regularly enrolled. And then identify which courses specifically you're co-teaching. Insert some adult ed content standards that might be covered there. And then we get to those questions we talked about earlier. The specific adult ed and literacy content that's taught. So what math skills, what reading skills, what writing skills? So what standards? Because we're always trying to tie these things back, because someday if Octave ever comes back and they look at our IET programs, which would be A-OK, they're going to ask, what adult ed content are you teaching in these IETs? What standards does this relate to? So we need to have that. And I know that's work, but it's also an excellent opportunity to tell your CTE partners exactly how you're going to help them. And it also lets you kind of loop around and make sure that we're delivering the highest quality instruction to our students as possible. So workforce prep activities, we're going to jump back to the PowerPoint here for my last 4-ish minutes. And then what occupational training? So what jobs are you teaching? Are you trying to prepare students for? It could be welding. It would be even better if you had a sweet employer partnership. If you had a sweet employer partnership where they were going to be able to directly link into an employer, especially if you're doing something like this with IELCE as a program where you're required to prepare students for and place them in unsubsidized employment. That's a place where employer partnerships are crucial. It'd be based on credit hours. So David Beach asked what that 25% was based on. I would say credit hours. Seat time gets a little dicey because depending on if it's a lab or if it's instruction, we figure credit hours differently. So it's just something to keep in mind. And as I would always try to deliver more, that 25% was a floor. I think you could be doing much more than that, and you're not going to get in trouble from us. You need to be delivering the support to the students that they need to succeed. That's the key. Don't just only do 25%, because that's when the K-Board police aren't going to show up. We need to be making sure that we're doing this not for the money. Money's nice. We need to be doing this for the students. So for the last 3 minutes, identifying a pathway. How do you identify a pathway? It should be high demand or high wage. To determine that, you would go to the Kansas Department of Labor information portal, which looks a bit like this. On the right-hand side in this green here under resources, there's high demand occupations. That sounds like something we might want. Department of Labor, since their data systems work so well, have this beautiful Tableau table that's available for the different local areas that you can click on. You could do that if you want. You can kind of see, general and operations managers, not super specific. Registered nurses, that looks like something that might be in our wheelhouse. Nursing assistants, you can look at what's popular in local area 1, all the different local areas. Or if you're more old school and you don't want to deal with the web table, you can come down here and you can download these 2 lists, the high demand occupations or the high demand high wage, which would be both. I'd always start with high demand, high wage, because that's probably the best bang for the buck for our students. But we understand that sometimes employment is a continuum, and you're not going to make the most money as during your first job. I don't know if anyone else had a different experience, but that was not mine. So you can download that. It's the same basic information, but that's kind of how you can identify what would be a good pathway. The list looks like this. You can do some sorting. Each tab is the local area specific ones. But you can see in Kansas, high demand and high wage software developers, registered nurses. You might just look through the list and see what would be good for your students. Look at your local area, what's good based on where your students live, and then maybe start knocking on some CTE program doors. Got a chat. So share back to, so I'd start there, look and see what's on the high demand, high wage list that you have a CTE program in, then start talking to that CTE program. You could also start talking about where do they lose their students? What's their weed out course? Because again, you could tell them Chris Lemon believes that you shouldn't have a weed out course. A weed out course means you're not supporting your students to an extent. But we need to be supporting students to make sure they succeed. We're not just this ivory tower deliverer of information. My personal opinion. So I'm going to try to wrap up because the time cop is coming for me. So with that common set of learning objectives, you might start looking at the adult ed content, fractions, addition, subtraction, multiplication. You might list a course and say exactly what you're doing from there. And then from there, I didn't do it for you. You might also list the adult ed standards, the college and career readiness standards that you're trying to hit. I know sometimes it varies based on student need in these situations, but it's good to have. And Eric Tincher will be very happy that you've taken some of that CCRS content and applied it into your courses. So what specific workforce prep activities? We can go to the link here to see what those are. Which I linked to the adult ed policy manual. And I told Aaron yesterday that I wish I could link to a specific point in the PowerPoint document or in the PDF that's here. You can do it in a PDF. So workforce preparation activities. Activities, programs, or services designed to help an individual acquire a combination of academic basic skills, critical thinking, digital literacy. It can also be showing up on time, presenting yourself in a professional manner, things like that. Short description. Which ones of those are you hitting? How are you doing it? Then what occupation? So what job are you trying to get students, especially for, for welding, that one's pretty cut and dry. If you have computer support specialist, that's a little less specific. So you might say these types of jobs, you might list companies. Again, if you've got a sweet employer partnership, hit that. And say we're actually preparing students to work at this company. Again, it's really up to what your institution's doing. And then from there, any questions? I'm like 4 minutes over, I'm sorry. We'll also be delivering a very similar presentation later on in the KAEA agenda. And again, we've offered many times, we are available to have these discussions with your institution. When we do that, we like to involve president, vice president level, just so that everyone is on this. Everyone's hearing the same information. Whether or not everyone gets on the same page, we'd like to try. But any other questions, comments about AOK? should at least know how to get to the KDOL website, and you should at least know where the adult ed or the AOK handbook is.
Perfect. No questions, it looks like. So I think everybody's ready for lunch. So we'll go ahead and take a break for lunch. We have it scheduled for 11:30 to 12:30, but we're not starting back till 12:40. So you have a little bit of time there to get back online. And this will be on a separate link. So we're going to go ahead and close out this session for now, and then we'll come back on that afternoon link, and we will get started right at 12:40. So we will see everyone at 12:40. And if for some reason you don't have the link for this afternoon, please reach out and we can get it emailed over to you. But otherwise, we'll see you then. Have a great lunch, everybody.